This is a basketball. And this is a basketball shooting machine, a 60-year-old made in 2 weeks. Although this seems incredibly difficult to build, but its theory, honestly, quite simple. To go back on how I built this basketball machine, I have to go back to the beginning of my story. As for an introduction, I've been playing basketball for over 4 years now. And over these 4 years, I've been training fairly consistently. But there just has been this one thing that always bothered me: grabbing rebounds. Even when I play at home, they often splash in the water or knock on the window. To solve this problem, I've tried many different strategies, including putting the bin under the hoop, hoping it bounces back, or getting Evan to grab me some rebounds. But obviously, he didn't like that. I thought I'd had to deal with these problems for the rest of my life until one day I was visiting the second-hand store with my mom and saw these, a bunch of metal poles. As I watched these, the most random idea popped up in my mind. With a total of $10, I bought these poles home. And that day, while I sat home and watched these metal poles, that idea began solidifying. Make a shooting machine! Before I wanted to make my own, I searched the price up first. Okay, maybe not. So, like that, I began to thinking of the possibilities to make my own. But at that moment, I didn't actually know how to make a start. So I asked a friend who's supposed to be smart. He told me all I need to do is have a huge net so the ball rolls into the net and somehow kick it out. So when I got home, I began doing my own research instead. And that idea finally began materializing. All I need to do is to have 2 wheels at the base and kick the ball out while a huge net at the top. Based off that thinking, I began doing the design, which I had 2 additions. First step, I need to cut the metal poles into pieces according to my design. And luckily for me, we have a grinder. Then I'll need to weld the pieces that I grinded into the shape of the base. And luckily for me again, we have a welder. But although this sounds really simple, I still came across a couple problems during this process. First off, there's just way too many components on the market. Like for the 2 wheels, brush, brushless, different voltage, DC-AC inverter, voltage regulator, potentiometer, and they all have to match. Furthermore, through my calculations I've done using projectile motion, which I just let in school the week before, I need at least a motor with 3000 RPM, rotations per minute, and it's nearly impossible to find a motor that operates that fast, nevertheless, their matching voltage regulator. Thankfully, I found one on TaoBao eventually, but the only problem was, shipping it from China cost 40% of the total cost, which includes the motor, the DC-AC inverter, its regulator, and potentiometer and stuff. But before that, I wanted to finish welding so that I finished the hardest part before the big purchase. On a side note, I absolutely hate welding. They literally burn my skin and blind my eyes. Grinding was a little better. And after that, I just needed to wait for the electric components to come. And again, there was another issue. One of the motors weren't working. And after opening the motor itself, I found out that it's because one of the wires was broken, either from transportation or whatever. So I took some off my phone charger and connected it. Another problem I had was welding the holder for the motor, because I need to weld a perfect hole and a perfect entrance, also allowing this bit, I don't know what it's called, but it stops the wire itself from rotating, and just fit it in perfectly. Now, like I said before, Welding wasn't my friend, but eventually I got it working after 3 or 4 attempts. And then it was time to put these into practice. But for some reason, the distance of its projection didn't match my calculation, which I later reflected on the machine's lack of perfect angle on projection and false advertising of the motors. They weren't as fast as they should be. Which I quickly resolved by welding another 4 legs below the base itself, and the 2 front legs slightly higher so it increases the angle of projection. And this time it did achieve the distance. After that, I just welded these slides to the bore and just straight row in and slide down from these slides. And after I finished the base of the shooting machine, I began doing the top net. Initially, my theory was to weld holes into the poles and attach the net with screws so that it hangs on top, but it just didn't work because my net wasn't that good quality and it just wasn't strong enough. And later, I used the ropes instead. So imagine this a series of holes, and the rope just simply goes like from that, while the nets get stuck in the middle. So this time it was a lot firmer, but I still came across some tiny issues. Because the net holder I used was horrible quality, and I'm not that good at welding, it fell off while attaching the nets. And you can see I'm wearing a face mask because I was sunburnt the second day from welding so much the day before. This time I managed to weld the net holder back on, but I just raised the question, how durable are these actually going to be? I didn't change it immediately, and it became something like this. Although I was thrilled of it finally working, but as you could see that the nets was actually just too high for the board to go through sometimes, and the poles itself was so weak that I really didn't think they were gonna last. So I had another version. As you can see, I changed the net up a bit. This time I doubled the amount of poles I need, so it was connected to another one. And also the nets was a lot wider. But you could also see, because I'm running short of materials for it to be strong, the length got really short. And I had to put it on a table for it to work. As you can see, if the net gets too high, the thing gets too wobbly and shaky. But if they become too low, the board doesn't necessarily go in. And I can't always put it on a table. So I decided to go back, buy some new poles, and this time attach it to the base instead. So I bought some metal poles and cut them into the length that I wanted and began welding them up to the base of my shooting machine. And finally, they're born, my ultimate spider edition, my own shooting machine. And that's it. How a 16-year-old built a shooting machine in only 2 weeks of time. Now overall, I'm very proud of the project, despite many issues in the process, which I argue wasn't all my fault, as they were random errors such as false advertising the motors, the motor wire broke, poor welding skills, and limited materials. But because I finished the product within less than $200 and bought all the available materials from like a second-hand shop or a dodgy seller, there isn't much to blame. At least it worked perfectly at the end. To be honest, ever since I saw the first shooting machine, I've always wanted one, but just didn't have the budget for that. And this whole progress is really quite amazing now to think about it. If I told myself before that I could make something like this, I probably won't even believe it myself. So this really surprises me on how much I can do. And as you probably already predicted, from that day on, I never had to grab another rebound. And that's the very end of my YouTube video. Now, normally I hate when YouTubers do this because they always interrupt in the video, which is why I put it at the very end of my video. Which is, if you sort of thought it was a little interesting, could you please like and subscribe? This is my very first video, and I'm gonna keep uploading contents like this, and hopefully, one day become an engineer.